Barry Markson in for Broomhead. Thanks for joining us. And I'm excited. We've got the Attorney General Kris Mayes is with us, and thanks for being here on KTAR.
Hi, Barry. It's good to be here.
It's always good to have you, and always a great discussion, and so much to talk about today.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness. We're going to talk about abortion, and we're going to talk what the latest law in Arizona is on abortion, because people don't know and how this stuff works. We're going to talk about this border bill that Republicans are trying to pass in the legislature and what that will do or won't do here in Arizona. But I wanted to talk to you about the fake electors. And this is something that, I've been looking at this now for 3.5 years and talking about on the radio. And I know you've been, the Attorney General's office has been investigating this since you took over. And we have it now. There's an indictment. The grand jury came out, indicted the 11 Arizona fake electors,
yes,
including Kelly Ward and Jake Hoffman and Anthony Kern, people who are actually in our legislature right now, but also indicted several Trump people, including his former chief of staff and several lawyers. So I wanted to ask you, number one, is the investigation over? Is it possible other people may be indicted as part of this investigation? No,
the investigation is not over. So I think that's an important point to make. We got to a point in the investigation and obviously made a presentation to the grand jury. And the grand jury, as you mentioned, issued these indictments against these particular individuals, but the investigation is ongoing. This is a serious case, and we're conducting a very professional, serious investigation and now prosecution.
I know a lot of people ask, because all of those national Trump figures were indicted, why wasn't President Trump indicted? And I know you can't comment too much on the investigation or what the grand jury did, but any comment on that? Why wasn't Trump included?
Yeah, I really can't. I can't get into that. Obviously, we mention the former president, or the indictment mentions the former president in several places. Obviously, the indictment alleges that this was a scheme to keep him in office. But I really can't get into the reasons that he's not indicted in this particular indictment.
All right, Kris Mayes, Arizona Attorney General, with us here on KTAR. So let's talk about the grand jury a bit. I know grand juries are generally secret, and I know you're going to stop me at certain places, and that's okay. But I do want people to understand the process, because it is so secret. Most really don't understand it that well. The grand jury is made up of citizens who are called for jury duty, but they're called for grand jury duty, right?
Correct.
So you'd be called for a grand jury, but if you're picked for that, you sit for a much longer period of time.
Yeah, it's that period of time depends on the cases that they're hearing, but yeah, it's for a longer period of time. The proceedings, and that's why I'm so careful about answering questions about this. The proceedings are supposed to be secret. Anyone who goes into a grand jury, the grand jurors themselves are instructed on that. And certainly my office is instructed on that, to keep those proceedings secret, and that's for a reason. Yeah, and that's to protect the rights of people who are accused before they've been convicted, and really before they've been charged. Absolutely. Because you're going to have people who may be discussed in the grand jury, where charges may be considered, who are never charged. That is correct. And it's not fair to have their names become public if they're not going to be charged. That is absolutely also correct. So there's been reporting now, Politico has this and others, that this particular grand jury was aggressive, that it was, people love to say, a good prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, and which means that the prosecutor goes into the grand jury, they tell him everything, the jury just falls asleep and nods along and gives them a rubber stamp at the end. That doesn't appear to be what happened with this grand jury, according to that reporting. Are you able to say that? I really am not going to characterize what the grand jury did. I think the indictments should be allowed to speak for themselves. Except to say, I will say this is a grand jury that asked questions, that was engaged. It's, I would say, the kind of grand jury you would want to have on a case of this importance. I mean, this is a case in which we allege that there was an effort to undermine American democracy, Barry. Right. And to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, to prevent the transfer of the presidency. And so really, in terms of a grand jury or a case that my office does and engages in, you couldn't have a more important case or a more somber and serious case than this one.
Kris Mayes is with us. She's Arizona Attorney General. We're talking about the fake electors grand jury. I think it was Paul Charlton was in this report in this article. He used to be a U.S. attorney here in Arizona. And I think he said, or someone in there said, that the difference with grand juries, that oftentimes they're less interested in doing what the prosecutor actually says when it's burglaries or more simple crimes. But when you get into something like this, public corruption or politicians or people, something that's more of a big public issue, that oftentimes the grand juries do become more involved and more take the lead on the investigation as far as what are we going to do, who are we going to indict. And from the reporting I've read, that's what it seems like happened here. This wasn't necessarily directed by your office. It was brought to them by your office, but then they were very inquisitive. They wanted to know more. They wanted to know who did what. And as they heard things, they in essence expanded what the grand jury did.
I'm not going to characterize what they did beyond saying that they were engaged and asked good questions, and that's what you want. That's what you want from any grand jury, and frankly, I think that every American and most Arizonans, I believe, understand the seriousness of this case, and that's, I think, what we saw in the product of this grand jury, which is the indictment. And again, I'll allow that indictment to speak for itself. We think we have a strong case to present in court. I think it's also important, as you know, Barry, as an attorney, that we should say that each of these individuals is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law by a jury of their peers. So
yeah, and that's a great point to bring up, of course. But I do think, and you've mentioned this, but it's important to understand this was, I call it a coup. You haven't said that, but I will. But this was a coup. It's that peaceful transfer of power. It's the only thing that makes the United States different from every other country in the world, that we have always had a peaceful transfer of power. And that's done because the people in power allow it to be done. And this was the first time with Trump where we had somebody who said, I don't want to leave even though I'd lost. And then this scheme was hatched by apparently by the Trump administration, by people in his administration and Trump, who said, we're going to find a way to keep you in office even though you lost. And the Arizona fake electors, the 11 Republicans who were these fake electors, they took steps to keep him in office even though he lost. And what amazes me is some of the evidence is emails between the fake electors and their lawyer it's public now, that where they were literally saying, isn't this treason? Aren't people going to think we're committing treasonous acts by doing this? And then they did it anyway. And their lawyer is the one calling them fake electors. It's absolutely amazing to me. The evidence is overwhelming in my mind, but we'll see where this goes.
We think the evidence is strong, and we would not have brought this case, Barry, to a grand jury if we didn't believe that. And the other thing I will say, and let me say this about all of the work that we do surrounding elections and making sure that this kind of an alleged scheme is addressed, is that, to your point about our democracy, I think when I think about cases like this one and the other cases that we're handling on elections, I think about the generations of Americans who fought and died for this country.
Yes.
The people who died for our democracy, who cared so much about this form of democracy that they were willing to give their lives or be maimed, be hurt, be forever scarred. And I think about them and their sacrifice. And when you think about that, you understand how important it was to bring this case. And I think also for me, there is a deterrent motivation here and effect, which is this can never happen again. What we allege in the indictment, this can never, ever happen in our country and in our democracy. And so, that's why we feel so strongly about it.
Kris Mayes is with us here on KTAR, the Arizona Attorney General. Very quickly, what are the next steps? I know you have arraignments coming up in May. What happens next for those who've been accused? Yeah,
so great question. We have initial appearances scheduled on May 21st. I will say here on your show that John Eastman has scheduled one for the 17th, I believe, May 17th. So
Okay.
he'll actually be coming earlier.
One of Trump's lawyers.
And so, as you pointed out, there are a number of these particular defendants who live out of state, and so they could ask the court for a virtual appearance, and certainly we would not oppose that. But at the initial appearance, these defendants will be have their photo taken and their fingerprints taken.
Is the plan to try all of these defendants, the fake electors and Trump's people, in one trial?
I don't think we've gotten to that point. We'll have some announcements down the road about that.
Is there any idea of how long it will take discovery and everything that occurs before a criminal trial? Like, when do we think a trial may take place?
Yeah, I know. I've gotten that question a couple times, and I just don't think there's a time frame on it. Obviously, we're going to allow the justice system to take the time that it needs, and this, we will see this case work its way through the justice system.
And very, very quickly, for those who've been charged, if they're found guilty, these are felonies, there's prison time at the end of this if they're found guilty.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. All right, Kris Mayes is with us. He's the Attorney General. We're going to take a short break. You're going to stay with us. Thank you so much.
You bet.
When we get back, we're going to talk about Arizona's abortion law, where it is now, what the latest you've done with the Supreme Court. Are we going to have an abortion ban, even if it's for a month or 3 months here before Election Day, before the repeal, and what happens next? And we're going to talk about this border bill and what it means for Arizona. Thanks for being here. The Attorney General is with us, Kris Mayes. Thanks for staying on for an extra segment.
You bet.
They're dragging you away, and you stayed with me. I appreciate that. All right, I want to get into the abortion question because this is confusing a lot of people. Obviously, the Supreme Court, the Arizona Supreme Court said we're going to go back to the 1864 total ban on abortion, except for the Save the Life of the Mother. The legislature now has passed a repeal of that, but it doesn't go into effect until 90 days after the close of the legislature.
Yep.
And people want to understand, what does that mean for folks who may need an abortion in Arizona?
Well, what it means, Barry, is potential complete chaos, and it means that, because that repeal won't go into place until who knows when, 90 days after they leave session, and who knows when that's going to be. So we're looking, that could be October, November, December, depending on when they leave. There will be a period of time when the 1864 near total abortion ban with no exceptions for rape or incest will be in place. And we are arguing to the Supreme Court that just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
They should stay their decision. They upheld the 1864 ban. Obviously, we argued vociferously against that law that was passed when Arizona wasn't a state. The Civil War was still raging, and women couldn't vote, nor could they wear pants. But anyway,
Those were the days.
Okay, and so let's stay. Let's stay this. We now know the legislature doesn't believe this law should be in place. Let's stay it. So we made those arguments. We have not heard yet back from the Supreme Court. We could hear back any day.
Did anybody oppose that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the other side opposed
the other
it.
side.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the far right wing group, Alliance to Defend Freedom, I think was the one, and a doctor named Hazel Rigg, and they think that this ban should go into place for 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And here's the problem, Barry, is that, number one, the women of this state and the men don't want to live under an 1864 total abortion ban. Number two, I've talked to now probably 50 to 60 doctors and chief medical officers in the state of Arizona. They are terrified. I had one Banner emergency room doctor say to me, he said, "Kris, what am I supposed to do? How close to death am I supposed to allow a woman to get before I am immune from prosecution?"
Exactly right. I always give this example in Texas, which has the 6-week heartbeat bill, but in essence, it's a full ban.
Right.
In Texas, abortions went from 50,000 a year to 6,000, not 6,000, 6.
Wow.
Because doctors are terrified. They're
Yes.
not going to do it.
Yes.
And that's exactly the fear. It isn't like some reasonable compromise where we're going to save the life of the mother.
No.
It's just a flat out ban unless someone's about to bleed out on the table.
Correct. And if we're going to obviously fight this to the end, we are not giving up. If the Supreme Court doesn't agree with me and does not stay that decision, I will look at all my options, including appealing to the United States Supreme Court. There are some supremacy issues, we believe, vagueness issues. We may take it to a court in Arizona. But we will do everything we can to stop it because women will die.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that I have to be that blunt about it.
I'm almost out of time, so let me ask you a quick question. Do you think, I know you've said you're never going to prosecute, and the governor has said that local county prosecutors can't prosecute. Do you think that would actually hold up if somebody in Mojave County or somebody went to try to arrest a doctor for doing an abortion in Arizona?
Well, I'm going to do everything I can in court to stop them.
Okay.
You know that, but unfortunately, we have a few county supervisors who have been as clear as mud. Dennis McGrain in Yavapai County, and frankly, Rachel Mitchell, have not said that they won't prosecute under this abortion ban, and that's what has doctors so terrified.
All right, very quickly on the Border Act that the Republican legislature is trying to pass right now, which would allow law enforcement throughout Arizona to arrest people. Is there anything in this bill, I know you disagree with it, is there anything in this bill that would actually slow the influx of illegal immigration into Arizona?
No, I don't think so. And I would say this. Look, we have an immigration crisis in Arizona. We have a fentanyl crisis, especially in Arizona, where this terrible, dangerous drug is flowing across the border. I've been very critical of the federal government for not getting it under control. But this is not the answer. This is a bill that will crater our economy because it will cause boycotts. It will lead to racial profiling, and it will cost our state billions of dollars because it tells local law enforcement that they have to do the job of the federal government.
Even the nonpartisan committee that looks at how much this will cost says it's going to cost over $325 million to Arizona if we do this. And we've seen this game before with SB 1070 and the harm it did to Arizona without really accomplishing anything.
No.
I'm going to talk to Ben Toma about that in the 11 o'clock hour. We'll see what he says. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Barry.
Kris Mayes, she's the Attorney General of Arizona, joining us on KTAR.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch and listen to the new season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.